My name is David Lamb. I own and operate, my wife, both of us, we own and operate Embers, Fireplace, and Chimney. We do a lot of brick restoration, a lot of fireplace restoration, and anything masonry related, typically with older bricks and older homes. First off, I just kind of want to read the room here. Who has a home or a piece of property? That kind of eliminates a lot of the modern talk of where bricks and stuff have changed. So years ago, since the beginning of time up until about the 1850s, lime mortar was exclusively used. You could break that rock down, you could always boil it, add sand to it, make a putty out of it. And then right about the Industrial Revolution, once factories really started moving, they started having more precision on their heating, so they were able to fire things to an exact temperature. Versus you and I, old school, your fire might be a different temperature. You might be feeding different logs than I am, so your kiln will be possibly hotter than mine there. So there's a lot of inconsistencies in the older homes as far as the actual brick and the mortar. But some of the older mortars, they just had more elasticity, and they've actually kind of moved with the building itself. Where today's modern buildings, you'll see almost stair-step cracking in them, and you see a lot more of them that actually there's no give in modern brick and mortar, it just cracks. That way, if you go to like a Target or a Home Depot or Kroger, you'll see on the side of the building, that building might be 60, 70 foot long, you'll see expansion joints going down the side there. And that's because they know that building's going to move, and they're trying to prevent cracking. Where that just didn't happen with older lime mortars. Those buildings fluctuate and move enough that would cause a give in it and not just immediately cause a crack there. Some of the more Portland cement is a stone that kind of got introduced to lime mortar as an accelerant to kind of hurry up the dry time on the mortar itself. So Portland kind of came around about, I'm going to say maybe roughly, and this kind of depends from New York to New Mexico, and there was just different ways of transportation, but Portland cement was brought in as an accelerator to kind of hurry up the dry time on lime. Lime mortar itself is a slow, pure process. So they might have taken a coffee can and just taken some of that Portland mortar and thrown it in the mix to help it dry. Over time and over years, it became the main ingredient, and lime kind of worked its way out. With that came all kinds of trouble, but it's also two different eras. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, most buildings were double wall and some are triple. I assume most of your homes are at least double. So you're talking solid wall construction. The design of it was, today we always try to defend moisture from a home, which is kind of crazy. For thousands of years, they've just accepted that with rain and with rain hard, the building might get wet, take that water and disperse it. So lime mortar has a lot of give to it, and it allows that water to be dispersed throughout the wall. Portland cement will stay just wet in that area. And that's part of the problem where you get so much freeze thaw and it causes spaces to just literally pop off. Kind of like in old ice cube trays you have, you put so much water at the top and then you freeze it, and when you go to pop it, it's swell. That's the same thing that happens with falling brick. Those spaces will come off. You tend to see it more on stuff from 1940 to today's era than you will on the older homes. Some of the older homes would do it from just decay over time, or now it's almost directly linked to it can't absorb that water, it doesn't want to absorb that water. Today's 1940 on up is a cavity wall, so you just the brick itself, where most of your homes are double wall, so you're going to have 2 layers of brick there. About every 7 courses, you'll see a header course tied in the halves. You'll see that running all the way down. That's a true header that ties all the way through there. That's actually considered a wall tie itself. Today we actually use galvanized wall ties. We use a galvanized wall tie and we'll tack it to the wall itself and the L that was underneath the mortar. That's today's wall tie. You don't really even have a very strong brick building nowadays, and that's part of the problem too with a durable home. I don't see most homes being built. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't see most homes from 1970 to today's era really lasting the test of time. I don't see how they're going to do that. I don't want to be negative and forecast a possible national emergency in 30 or 40 years, but I'm going to be real with you. It does seem that way. these buildings just hold on to water and they collect a massive amount of mold. I believe today's mold issue is going to be the asbestos issue. And I think that these buildings now are so tight with one layer of brick, multiple layers of flashing tie-back paper, and everything in between. And then you got your studs and your insulation. And then I think that everybody's cramming in on an 8-inch foundation. Yeah.
What's your opinion like what's this system? Is that just like more of the same, or is that like actual system?
SIP systems are cool. That's a type of flashing, rubber flashing, but it's more designed for today's style of brick.
So you won't have the same problems you think it's like all these like networks that kind of.
It's just another form of flashing. I mean, for thousands of years, nobody really used caulking or flashing, and they kept buildings pretty tight. Nowadays, when you go to Home Depot, there's just dozens of choices of caulking, flashing. We're always trying to defend water, where the old builders and architects just accepted it. You know, they knew that the home's going to get wet. It's inevitably going to rain for 3 or 4 days straight, and that building's going to be saturated. But that water through the line water would disperse it. You know, so that whole, it wouldn't, let's say if you got a windowsill and that rain was just pouring down on it, that lime water in this old brick would actually remove that water. Where today, it's not going to do that. The water's going to stay there until the sun dries it out. And therein kind of lies the problem. There's no dispersion of, you know, water that's just kind of sitting there. So different mortars, as far as I'm going to talk about on repairs go. So the Historic Society is okay with Portland cement and hydrated lime and sand. As a combo, these work together. So you almost go like 1 part Portland, 2 parts hydrated lime, and then about 8 or 9 parts sand. You could do that with a spoon or a dump truck, a bucket, a 5-gallon bucket. Just those parts have to be equal. This makes it almost as a type O mortar. So there's a couple different types. On block work, you'll use a type S, which is about 1800 psi strength. Type N is going to be used on most residential homes today being built. It's about 700 psi's. This allows for about 300, 350 psi strength. So the Historic Society is okay with this being not too strong of a mortar. However, once you add Portland, you lose the breathability. So immediately, it's kind of cans the breathability. The industry now has, Specmix is just a company. They made a mortar themselves, and this is called a tuck point mortar. This is an actual type O mortar from the factory. All you got to do is add water to this, so you don't have to have the equation of, you know, the Portland cement, the hydrated lime, the sand. You can just straight add water to this. Very convenient to be able to use this on a lot of projects where, you know, you need more or less one way or the other. This can be kind of cumbersome just because you got powders everywhere, open bags, things of that nature. So this is pretty cool that this has now been available like the last 10 years to the industry. Soft mortar, type O, still has Portland in it, so you lose that breathability. But it is acceptable to use because it only holds 300-ish psi strength. This stuff here, over the last 5-6 years, I've really started leaning back to this. This is the old world, pure and natural hydraulic lime. This is an NHL 3.5. So the 3.5 is just the type of strength they use in it. This works all by itself as a binder in itself. So the difference between a hydrated lime and a hydraulic lime is this is its own binder itself. It does not need Portland cement. It still has breathability. It still can flex with the building. There's 3.5 is kind of your average use. On a 2, it'd probably be more. There's more free line in a number 2, so it'll allow more give and take inside the building. And a 5 is a more high strength. That's more designed maybe for stone basement or something like that. That'll take a chimney top, something that'll take a lot more water and more durable on a freestall. To kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about, when these are measured in a 2 and a 3.5 and a 5, those are the strengths. If there were a strength on this, it would be like 40 or 42. That's why Portland cement is a real problem. It just cures so rock hard and so fast. It's not really compatible with older bricks like this. One, just because it's just old brick. But this wasn't fired at a temperature that like today's newer brick are. So these would be like an example of today's newer brick, which have holes in them. You find some of them with 10 holes, some 3 holes. But this brick could have potentially been burned at 1700 degrees in a controlled environment at the factory. Where that's where I bring it to these older brick. It just really depends on how much wood you put in your fire over there and how much wood I put in mine. So some of those bricks are stronger than others. I don't know if any of you have uncovered plaster walls and seen the whole wall of brick behind it. It's a pretty nice idea if it's in fair shape to visually keep it in your home. Want it as a wall, or an accent wall, or something like that. They will tend to powder out because those interior brick were designed to be softer. They knew for a fact that this pile over here is not being heated as much, so we'll just use that for the interior. The exterior ones are more red. You'll notice that. In the when Dwight D. Eisenhower was president, he really created the interstate system. That allowed a lot of these buildings that were double wall, triple wall thick to be torn down. Those brick were salvaged. So you'll see neighborhoods in the 1970s, 1980s built with used brick. It's still a single layer brick. They're not a double wall, but they were able to reclaim and reuse those brick. We do a lot of work where there's, somebody might have 4 brick over here, 8 here, 10 here. They're like, why are they going to in such different areas? And then we start talking about why it is, because when they tore that building down, they just palletized all the brick and didn't separate the interior from the exterior. So now on someone's home built in 1974, say, they're going to have orange ones scattered through red ones. The orange ones are always soft. They were really designed to be interior brick there. So with the mortars being softer over the years, I've pretty much grown up and done this my whole life. The more I do this, the more restoration work I do, I keep leaning more towards hydraulic because it's still burned at a low temperature, that it still has the impurities to act as a binder itself. Hydrated is burned super hot, so it's kind of killed everything that's available. It won't really set up as a binder. It'll harden up. We use it a lot in like school classes and stuff like that because if you just mix hydrated lime and sand, it's still workable a day or 2, 3 later. It never has, if you keep Portland out of the equation, it won't really set up. So on some small interior jobs, you can just use these two, but this is really never meant to stand alone as a binder. It needs Portland cement. Do you have a question?
Yeah, what types of jobs would you recommend different binders for?
To be honest with you, work like the preservation brief number 2, they're like the National Park Service. They set pretty much all the standards, but you got to think of standards and codes. They're just bare minimum. You can always exceed code. Most builders aren't going to do that. That's where I lean more towards the same estimates material because it has no importance. So if all of you raise your hand on the 100-year-old question, probably none of you have any Portland cement in your home. Portland cement will smother masonry wall. You see a lot, it's kind of like a last ditch effort on a chimney. When you see it stuccoed or arched, something like that, it has a real gray, by nature, Portland cement is a gray stone. They do make it in a white, and the Historic Society says if you can use it, use the white because it would match most of the lime orders in your home. The gray really wasn't available until about 1940, 1950 in that range. So for visual, if you're going to mix up a type O, then you want to use the white Portland cement in that sense there. I have no beef, I'm not against any of this, but the longer I do this, the more I realize. Let me show you something really I always thought was pretty interesting. On this here, one of their slogans says since 30 BC. So this has been tried and true. It's been around for a long time. That's why I like that. It kind of depends on the project on what you're doing. Exterior, I would probably lean, if you're going to do this, then I would probably just get a bag. If you're just going to do 5 or 10 bricks, something like that, I really wouldn't recommend get a whole load of line works and get a whole bag. And if you're just going to do a handful of bricks, this is totally fine.
What about like a retaining wall?
On a retaining wall, yeah, I would probably, exterior retaining wall, it's going to take a lot of moisture from the ground as well. So I probably would lean more over on the type of the side there. But there's nothing wrong with this either. Yes.
If you're going to tuck point exterior wall, you know, if you feed it over. Yeah. This is
At that point, no, I do kind of lean more towards the typo. What he said was, if you know it's going to get painted, so then it's lost its breathing breathability already because it's been painted, so it really doesn't matter. You can go with the type O. This is a little more expensive, but in life, when I think get what you pay for it. Yes.
Do you need to cure the line certain amount of time for the line?
So you can use like, not necessarily, the longer, if you mix something up, like I mixed this batch up earlier this morning at about probably 6 o'clock this morning, trying to get like a brown sugar consistency, and it's still there. Had I mixed up, and that's this here, had I mixed up that, this is starting to dry right now. So it sets up very quick. With that question being said, I brought this yesterday, I wanted to show you guys, whenever you're doing masonry work, especially in the summertime, it's recommended to cover it if you can. Not saying that every single project, if you lay 3 brick, you don't necessarily need to cover it up. If you build a chimney or you took out 50, 60, 80 brick on a wall, you want to start dropping sheets of burlap, wet damp burlap, because you want a slow cure. Faster something sets up, quicker all that moisture's gone out of there. It almost can harden to like a brick, like a grill, almost like a crispy. So anytime you can slow down the process, then that's better. And that's kind of dries way too fast. Where this is, you can repoint something and almost come back hours later and actually then address the jointing of it. Where this, you lay this up, you gotta be careful when you lunch. By the time you come back, if you didn't join it, it might already be dry and hardened at that point there. So with the, I wanted to briefly talk about the word tuck pointing. So tuck pointing is a style actually of the bed of the mortar joint itself. Actually, when we remove mortar joints, that's removal can be done by a couple different tools, but the replacement of mortar is called repointing. So tuck pointing, and this is how versatile this word is in our industry. This company, this $1 million company uses the word tuck point mortar. I can almost assure you there is no true tuck pointing style done in the United States of America. So we take an old brick building and the back sides, like all 4 sides are like this brick. Now I know you guys, there's probably a variety in this room here where all 4 sides of your building look like this, but some of you probably have the nicer edition where your 2 sides and your back one are this, and you have a more hard fired brick on the front of the building, some pretty tight, almost butter joints on it there. That look was mimicked over in Europe for if you had 4 sides of your home like this, if you wanted a more high-end looking brick, you would tuck point it. So you would match the mortar to look like the brick, and then get fine, putty ribbon all the way throughout there. So it looked like your home was welcome when it actually was. You had, run the mill average brick, but with the style of tuck pointing, it made it a much richer look like that there. That word tuck pointing is kind of thrown around loosely in our industry. I use it all the time too, but that's a style of repointing. I don't actually tuck things. That's the way the joint itself is finished out and designed. So it is important on removal of mortar on how you don't want to just mix up mortar and put it over something. You actually need to remove that mortar. It's a couple of different ways. Probably one of my favorite tools is just a simple file. You can take this and hammer and walk out some mortar joints and stuff like that. When you start getting into bigger projects, a lot of architects across the U.S. want to start seeing more pneumatic tools as far as like chipping and chiseling go. So we use this a lot because this just connects to air. So you can actually start fine tuning. This company here was a carbon company back in 1890. In the last 15, 20 years, they started selling this kit, realized how much of a need you can be more delicate with the surrounding masonry areas rather than just taking a grinder and cutting. Because if you take a grinder with like 4-inch diamond blade, you start going down, you can scar up a lot of the bricks. It's hard to get in those head joints, being that tiny, you stick a grinder there, you can almost lose it. You scar up that brick or the one below it. So this gives you a little more, it's a little more delicate, and it's not just constantly on. It's only in action when you are actually going at it for the removal. So it's pretty cool. They give you different styles, different blades you can use for that there. The other tool we use a whole lot, this thing, I love this thing. It's called an Arbortech. This is an Australian company, hence the word Arbortech. They make a lot of fine tuning woodwork products. think honestly, they kind of stumbled upon the use for old soft lime mortar and how you could use this. And so then they started selling to the masonry industry across the world initially. Over time, they've kind of fine-tuned a few things. They put an attachment on it now. It's kind of like an accordion. So you hook this up to a vacuum hose, and I mean, you can use it. What the difference with this is, a grinder blade will spin and cut it, so I mean, you can get dust everywhere. This actually works on like reciprocating blades, so it almost chops the mortar. Even without a vacuum in itself, this in itself will just kind of more or less pulverize instead of creating a dust cloud everywhere around you, where a diamond blade is going to create a serious dust cloud. They make these in a couple different blades, so you can actually use them specifically for head joints and for bed joints themselves. But if you want to retrieve just one brick, this tool is just amazing. I mean, just work in the bed joints, hit the head joints, and you can just take 2 fingers and slide that brick right out. It's a really cool tool.
Places like Arts have those?
Arch Metal, I don't know if Arts does. I know Schuloff Tool Rental over in Cincinnati. They're now all around. Super, super cool tool. But yeah, so you want to remove the mortar joint itself about 2.5 times the actual width of the mortar joint. So if you want to try and get as close to about 1 inch depth. That way you actually have a good surface. And once you reach that depth, we'll vacuum out, like if we were to grind out different areas, say this large or whatever, we'll vacuum all the dust, get everything kind of, fine tuned, and then water is like masonry's best friend. So you want to spray that area real good so your new mortar that you're using, or your new brick that you're using, can actually take, it doesn't need to suck up all the water out of the mortar itself. It's already kind of damp inside. You don't want to saturate a wall with hose, but a tank sprayer, pump up one, they really work great. Any questions? Go ahead.
What about color? Ours is not kind of blackish. With some speck. How do you, those things come in different?
They do. I brought a little sample. This is, so there's a manufacturer that makes a lot of different ones. I think this is like, I think it's 58, which is a blonde color. They make blonde, khaki, ash, coal, red. There's a lot of different colors in a pigment in itself. This is a tricky game here to play with, because what am I matching up to? Your mossy chimney where a tree's been hanging over it, or your covered porch where it's always been protected. And there can be multiple shades on any one given house. So I mean, this backside might be, lighter than the front, so you're trying to mix up different batches. This is specifically designed to make it more eye appealing. This doesn't change the character of the mortar itself, but visually it can dramatically change the job.
You just add that.
Right, so they have liquid you can get a little loose with pretty quick from experience. So I just typically work with powder. When you mix up, like if I were to put all my powder and sand in a bucket, and I would turn my drill on without adding any water, that's when I would start adding my color. And then you can almost see on a dry mix that color is going to roughly be that when it's all said and gone through and been blended out and actually dried out. Mortar matching is a tough thing. It really is. So on a lot of projects, we'll try and wash an entire wall or a chimney first, or even after the project, to really kind of see what are we working with. Is this more of a light buff, a dark buff? Do we need to throw black in there just to give it some age? A lot of that age, that blackness can come from a city like this 150 years ago, coal fireplaces. I mean, they were just spewing out. Most of us might have been walking around with umbrellas and blocking some of that soot that's just pouring down. So you'll have different areas on a wall that, on closed homes, that maybe this guy's chimney, the wind always blows this way, this wall is completely black on the side. But the other 2 or 3 sides of the house are just a regular color. There's nothing there. So mortar dye, it's a tough game to play, but it really is important because you want to knock the new look off. You don't want that, hey, we just finished up 5 minutes ago. Now it's going to take like a decade for this thing to start. That mortar dye is cheap almost, to kind of help you with that. There's a couple different companies. I think Solomon is a mortar dye company. Rainbow is another one. True Tone. Those are the top 3 companies. Yeah.
What's a good way to clean the brick? You're just wanting, it just looks
Okay.
filthy.
So there's a couple different ways to clean it. On brick, we would use a brick detergent. Nothing wrong with that. I'm just always leery on old masonry walls using chemicals. You don't know what's going to happen, how it's going to react. I'm a big fan of a scrub, like a deck scrubbing brush, 5-gallon bucket, and a bottle of Dawn. You know, this Dawn is completely harmless. It's not going to hurt anything. It lightens up. It'll take off like that green moss algae. It'll open up the pores. I feel like on a start, that's the best way to do it because you're not really going to do damage with Dawn, and you're not really going to do enough damage with elbow grease either. You know, but it is important when washing to pre-wet the whole surface, then apply your cleaner, and then rinse it. That's the biggest issue today. I don't know if you've ever even consciously noticed this, but you look at maybe a modern building like a Kroger or Target, you almost see like a white over it. And a lot of times that's due to efflorescence, the salt being pulled out. A lot of times that's from somebody using a chemical that was too strong and it actually burned the face of the brick there. So that you can use too strong of a chemical, but I don't like putting a lot of chemicals in with old natural brick and natural mortar.
We have a wall with a serious mortar problem, and it's a painted wall, base of brick, 200 years old, face popping off, all kinds of issues. Heritage Council, so the first thing you got to do is get the paint off of this. It's the worst thing, get the paint off of this brick. And they said use a, paint remover. Do you have a recommendation on that?
So honestly, this question has become a lot more popular throughout the years. I've been part of the show since 2012. That question keeps coming up more and more. And I hate to just tell people, I don't want to tell you, repaint it. Like ultimately, you want to make sure your roof and gutters are watertight, so they're not draining on the wall. I do believe that painting an old masonry surface does encourage trapping of moisture, which causes damage there. What you can do about that, most European restoration companies, because they've been restoring stuff for thousands of years, they use like DOF systems, and basically that's like boiled water, so they're hitting at like 220 degree water temperature and like a pressure washer. You're almost melting, like you can kind of take a putty knife and just kind of scrape it off there. There's so many painted old historic buildings, it's like, what do you do? Ultimately, that's what I'm saying. As long as you know that your roof's in good shape, your gutters do what they're supposed to do, fix up the masonry. There's not much, most people aren't going to spend the money and the time and the effort to rip all the paint off. And what makes me nervous, I think a lot of newer companies tend to use high pressure and you're actually damaging brick. You know, like if you're sandblasting, it's terrible idea to do 150 or more.
Well, that's the first thing I asked them. They'll, I'm like, oh, we come in and sandblast or pressure. It's like, okay, I'm not using you.
Right.
I mean, it's obviously helping out.
Right, it's too
But
strong.
I
That's
will-
why, that takes me back to yours with it. On cleaning, I can use a pressure washer here and there, but I'm also myself and my guys were aware of what's going on. Some people are gonna crank that thing to 10 and I'm just blast stuff. They don't even realize, holy cow, you started the brick, trying to do that. That's why I like a more softer approach of elbow grease and water hose, just a light Dawn, something. And that's not to say that Dawn's gonna fix the problem. You might have to go the next step up and try something else. That's always where I go first on that. Yes.
When you go with painted brick, is there a type of paint that you would recommend?
So, that's happening. A type of paint, I'm leaning more towards natural stuff. Limeworks makes mineral paints, like lime paints, so they're still breathable. They're not like a today's modern paint that's almost like a plastic. It kind of locks in that moisture. So like whitewashing was pretty popular. Like take Greece, for instance, the beautiful city part. This is right on the ocean. They have like once a year line washing parties. That's why you always see those neat houses all on the cliffside with all super bright white. So lime painting was kind of the first real paint. But if you already have like a different kind of paint on there, acrylic paint or plastic paint of some sort, it just takes me back to, if that's already done, just make sure you're watertight. You want to have the masonry repair for that. But these older buildings, to breathe. Sometimes once you add the paint to it, you kind of stop that breathing. It's almost like the damage is done in a sense. Yes, ma'am.
So what's happening in my house is that a neighbor went down and he was watering it, but it was hitting my brick. And so now our back stairwell, where the plaster is all bubbled up, and, you know, I don't know what to do. I asked the contractor said, no, it was done right, you know, as far as the painting on the outside of the house, because it needs to breathe. And he's saying, no, it wasn't done right, because it was done right, and that water should have gone through your house. So anyway, we have to repair it, and I see that. And what we need to do on the outside.
So, like, if someone has a painted house and they hire us to come in and do a bunch of masonry work on it, they're like, when can I paint it? I'm like, wait as long as you can. You know, let this mortar set up and dry. You're in no rush to hurry up and have it painted. Let the mortar and everything, sometimes just scraping paint allows the building to finally breathe out. You start noticing different damp areas, because that water once has been trapped for years inside there. It's trying to get out. It's a tricky situation. So many historic homes are painted. It's like, now what? You know, that's not the original design. That's why I lean more towards a natural lime wash paint, mineral paint, rather than today's modern paint to that nature.
So that company's called Limeworks?
Limeworks US, Limeworks.us, I think it is. They have a tremendous amount of products that are specifically designed for old world restoration. And they're competing against the industry that keeps using Portland cement, which inevitably Portland cement will almost take a brick and put it in a choke. That brick wants to breathe, you can't, because that mortar around cause damage. A lot of times when you use a high strength mortar and you had a wall, say there was multiple areas on a wall that were repointed, you had it all fixed up and everything. It looks great on day one, and then the next 5 to 10 years, you're seeing it like crumble again. Right. 6 years ago, we had it done. It's because the mortar is too high strength. It's got all the brick down and choke. That water now is going through the brick, freezing and thawing versus the pathway was designed for water.
So when you're repainting the brick, there's really no reason to use a primer, right? Because that's gonna even keep water from more out, right?
Right.
And then I've got a limestone walkway that's got huge cracks, and is there anything to fill those in?
I don't know how big the crack is. I'm okay with some different caulkings like that. The neat thing about caulking, if there's still movement, it's going to roll. Right? You know, versus like people ask us that a lot of times, there'll be cracks on the home. What should we do? And I'm like, unless you have talked to your foundation company, guarantee that's not still moving. For year 1 or 2, I will try caulking it, maybe just taking some sand and throw it over the caulking so naturally it kind of takes your eye away from it. But you'll be able to see if that building's still moving. So I'm not against caulking, but a lot of times they can lock the moisture too. So it kind of depends on how much caulking.
Yeah, maybe slabs. And then where can we buy that coloring, the tint color?
You could buy them. So there's a couple different brickyards that I use around town. One is Star Builders. Star Builders is located in Fairfield, Ohio, up by Jungle Gyms, and they're located in Florence, Kentucky. So in Star Builders, uniquely enough, they're one of the only companies in the whole tri-state area that has always sought after the demolition companies that tear these buildings down and try to hustle and get these brick before they just went to the city dump. So 20 years ago, this brick was like a quarter, and then it went up to 50 cents. Now it's a big chunk. Now this brick itself is like $1.72 one brick. Because they're starting to realize the value in it. Where this brick, if you buy a brick, it's about 40, maybe 50 cents. So I mean, dramatic price difference, but supply and demand. People are starting to realize, wow, we should quit throwing these away. We take it to the dump site. You know, there's actually a value for restoration side. Yes.
So in my situation, should we take the plaster off that's been bubbled on the inside and try to repair more on the inside, or do we try to repair more on the outside?
So I would probably try, I would maybe remove the plaster, see what you're looking at, and then have the outside. They're trying to stop the water from entering out, but allowing the interior to breathe out. So this is also, bricks are going to act different in the home nowadays because of our heating and cooling system. I'm sure when a lot of you guys had houses, there wasn't an air conditioning, let alone indoor. You know, so you're talking about a whole different envelope now, different things going on inside a home. that causes it to work well or to not work well. It's that different air, you know, that gets in the house there. Yes.
So the whole subject of breathing, walls breathing drives me crazy. So this house that we bought, painted when we bought it, so we painted it again. But on the inside, plaster was a lot damaged. There's plaster. So I furred it out, insulated it, and put drywall. And it's all, I've always wondered whether that was a good thing to do or not. I've talked to architects and people since then. They said, well, since the outside of the brick is always sealed, that's a good thing, because you've got air conditioned air on the inside now, you should be okay. Is that
I kind of agree with that. I do a lot of work with Habitat for Humanity, and that's how I mean, all the houses they pick are 1890s-ish in that range, and now they're actually furrowing the walls out, insulation, but they're putting them behind before they put that insulation. But yeah, that's the first time a lot of these houses have ever even seen insulation. You know, ever in 100, 150. There. So I don't think there's anything. I always believe in respectful restoration. There's going to be new ways, new technology to do something. We do a ton of chimney work, and we see a lot of furnaces and water heaters take all that hot moisture, rise up the chimney as they're rising, cools down, and soaks it in. It's not that I'm trying to not sell myself another job, but the better route would be, instead of trying to deal with this water heater, go with a more modern one and just shoot it out. The more modern ones are going to have a fan blower motor, so they're not tied into a chimney, which is based on natural draft. They're just blowing right out the side. You know, it kind of helps, and that's modern technology. It's okay to go versus just trying to preserve something for no good. That's something that's going to cause real problems. Yes.
When you're doing mortar restoration, removing existing mortar, how deep in do you, or how you?
So it's supposed to be 2.5 times the height of the joint itself. So your average joint is like 3/8 thickness, maybe a 1/2 inch thickness. So you want to be about 2 to 2.5 times the depth. That way that new material can actually get inside there. So you're talking roughly 3/4 of an inch. In some areas, you're even be softer than that. You take like a 5-in-1 tool, you know what I mean? Go back inside there, and they say, "Whoa, I don't need 4 inches back here." So you want to find a stopping point. But usually, it's close to an inch as you can get, which in actuality ends up being about 3/4 of an inch deep.
May it be at the regular depth?
Yeah. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to try and achieve a 3/4 inch depth there, and that goes for the bed joints and the hinge.
So when you go too deeper on spans, there are risks in like compromising structurally.
Not necessarily a risk, unless you start like going too far, and that makes sure it might teeter itself. When you go back to repoint it, you want to do it in lifts. You don't want to, let's say it is that deep, you don't want to pack in mortar at a 2-inch depth. You want to do it in a lift. You want to do like a 1-inch lift and revisit it about 5, 10, 15 minutes later, do a second lift, and maybe a third lift, just depending on how deep that is. You just don't want that to all try and dry at one time. It's the lifts that is important there. So we'll do that a lot on a lot of different jobs. Let's say we were to actually get on some areas, it's an inch, inch and a quarter. I don't want to pack that in all at once. You know, I want to do a second lift. So I'll try and get maybe 3/4 of an inch on the first round, then come back. So you kind of do it in sections like that. Yes, sir.
What are you saying doing concrete and stone walls? It must be the same.
Actually, yes. Yeah. Pretty much the exact same thing. Yes.
They have bricks that are crumbling, and one thing is reason why that like water maybe, or and the second thing is where would I take replacement bricks? Max. Like,
It could be from water. Most likely it is. Water always. At the age of it itself, if it's linked to a certain area, it could actually, like it's linked near a chimney, it could be what I was talking about before. The exhaust has saturated going up that. You know, a lot of times you just look around in an older town like this, you can see where that chimney goes all the way down that wall. You know, you can almost see repairs from decades ago or just a year ago, where maybe somebody cut out 20 brick, kind of like zippered up that chimney. that would be from exhaust. You know, the other area could be just from a leaky gutter that is just attacked that one area for X amount of years. Ultimately, though, it's water that's caused that to kind of break away. The best way would be to cut that brick out and actually remove it. And these brick you can get, Western Hills Builder, they carry a lot of them. They just kind of come and go in different brick yards because it just depends on what the next building that one of these large excavation demo companies take down. There's some liability to too. Nowadays, most of these demolition companies do fences. You know, they don't want just random people walking on that property. You know, grab it. And I understand that too. But, you know, it breaks my heart to see them. They just crush them. And, you know, it's like, that's not going to be reused. That's going to be garbage. The other way I want to touch base on, if you use an architect here, you actually extract in one brick. So you cut the head joint here, cut the head joint there, you took the head joint, and now you actually kind of pull that brick out, now you lift that wood inside there. That's when you would actually bed mortar down there, put the brick in, fill the joints themselves. That's one way. So let's say if there's the other thing, again, if you didn't want to take the whole brick out, you thought it was more just like a bad chip face or something like that. Limeworks, they make a lithomax material. Lithomax is almost like Play-Doh, if you will. So I mixed up a little bit of this. It does, consistency does remind me of Play-Doh, but you can, it's actually designed for visual patches. It doesn't really bring the integrity back to the brick. You know, if the brick's pulverized, it's done, it needs to be replaced. But this is kind of cool because they come in like different colors. You can patch up a brick. That's really, this is designed for like brick patching. It's also designed for like limestone, like maybe headers, sills. They make a little bit stronger version that is like specifically designed for stair treads or something like that. If those limestone steps are just worn out, that product is specifically designed for that. If you use a mortar, you'll just never bind to that there. So this is like I wouldn't even call it a Band-Aid patch. It's not really designed like that. It's more just to visually enhance the actual shape of it. Kind of repairs that right there.
What was the name of the product?
This is called Lithomax. And Lithomax, it comes from the company Limeworks. It's one of their products that they make designed to repair terracotta, brick, and stone. And it comes in, they've got varieties of colors. You can buy it in sandstone taupe. There's about 20 different colors. They even have a color chart too. So what I like about Limeworks is they're like a big company, but they're still like feel small. You can talk to people directly and tell them what you got going on. You know, for this situation, am I looking at an NHL 3.5 or an NHL 5 or an NHL 2? They kind of coach and walk you through. It's not just a huge organization, but they want to see success in your restoration.
Here, yeah. It's almost like a 2 foot by 2 foot, 1 foot. I take all those bricks out, is that safe or is that
So-
like there's a couple?
You can generally, that's a good question. We do some restoration sketch and quick. You know, I can start taking out bricks and it's like, we better hurry up. Lunch, I'm waiting. Like, this is dangerous here. So, yeah, I mean, I would generally recommend if you're going to try and tackle something, keep it to about a 2x2 area. You know, even if you got this much brick that need to come out, start working on these few here, cut all these out, put these back. So maybe over on this side, cut these out, just kind of keep working the project that way. That way you're not cutting out a whole area and praying to God that this area stays.
Yeah,
It doesn't
yeah.
just collapse down. Typically, there are no work on the side, once it's a solid wall. So we'll cut out areas, and remember where I talked about the header sits this way, we'll cut out brick all the way to the header, because I know that brick's tied in all the way. So we'll be able to take these face brick off here and know that this is supporting that too. Any other questions? Yes.
Rather than
Is it a crack or is it like deterioration, lamination?
I mean, chunks of it are missing out because of that.
I want to say that the Lithomax would probably be good for that there because Lithomax with Max is cool because you put this on the wall like that, you can now let that sit for hours, even days, and come back and keep carving it. I mean, I think you can sand this down like 5 days later. So it gives you some time to like apply it and apply it proud, and then start like shaping it back as needed and start shaping it. I mean, this is really cool material. Like you can go as far as your artistic eye and hand can take you on reshaping things. So that might be, if it's a limestone, that's what this stuff is designed for.
There's a little bit of repointing problems with the mortar, the face of the brick. Washing.
That's kind of what his question was about, you washing there. So if you've repointed an area, let it sit for 2-3 days and then try to pull back and wash it. I would try it on. Right, so you can go with, I don't say the word neurotic acid because that's way dangerous. And that would be everything in sight. But most brick cleaners today are glorified neurotic acid. It's more diluted version of that. So you could go heavy because like on the back, a lot of those brick cleaners will tell you like 4 to 12 parts, just depending on how dirty it is. You're kind of making a judgment call. I would always recommend dilute heavy water. You can always add more chemical. Once you get into it, you realize if you wash that area, you're like, still not exactly what I want. Tomorrow maybe up that. Add maybe 8 parts, something like that there. That's a tough one because dealing with bricks and mortar stuff gets real messy real fast. It starts looking very unappealing to the eye. And it's like, just remove it, that cloudy was off, really just show me the brick and mortar. That's all I really want to see there. So there's different cleaners you can use. But I'm real leery about what type of cleaners. I always try to research the project, near the house, and really try to think, because if you go to a brick garden and pick it up, the guy behind the counter, they're just going to start looking at it. They don't understand the project, they have to look into it. This is a general cleaner we've been using for 9 years. It's great. It's like, you have no testing behind that to prove that. But less is more. You can always go back and rewash it. If you burn something, it's too late to try it. You could even fine tune it with just little small wire brushes, even something like this. It's not a wire brush quite like maybe something like that. You know what I mean? This is a little bit less aggressive. You can even try sandpaper. Just be careful that you're not attacking the brick so much that you're actually removing the excess mortar, damaging the brick itself. There, that should be like a real fine sandpaper. See what that does. Lightly sand it, put a hose on it, kind of check out next time, and see what happens there.
So these products that you showed us are not going to be sold. Where do you like it?
So Doppy's Lumber down in Cincinnati and Star Builders both sell this spec mix. For most of your guys' projects, if you're going to do it, this is totally fine. The only problem is from the factory when they make this, they're using the gray. They're using the gray wood, so you're going to get more of a gray color. When most of your houses had original lime mortar, that's why they're looking at the white wood. That's what's there because that'll give you more the true color of what your house probably was. Yes.
Do you ever recommend a brick sealer?
Good question. All right, so sealer, that's a dangerous terminology in my industry. Sealers act like plastics and they lock everything in. Water repellents and they repel water against the surface. They allow moisture when it rains heavy for 2 or 3 days. Some of it's going to come in, but it allows the sunlight to follow and they pull it back out. A sealer is
You see some of that
right. You want anytime you're applying a water repellent to a brick vertical surface, you want a breathable material. That's a big deal there to make sure it's breathable. However, I'm not huge on water repellents on older homes. That was already designed to take water and breathe out. Now, the newer brick, today's more modern brick, again, the Brick Institute of America recommends that any exposed masonry, like a chimney, a wing wall, or problematic area where the westward winds always come in, yeah, we use a water repellent, but I wouldn't recommend just applying a water repellent to an environment, just because I don't think that's a good idea. You want to stay away from sealants. That's a loose term, how tough one is a loose term. But when you go for water repellents, I always go for more top shelf stuff. Cheaper water repellents and sealants will have like cerates and animal fats in them. They just kind of clog up with pores versus allowing protection.
Where do you get that?
That comes from libraries. Yep, comes from libraries.
To use that as a mortar, is it just that at the same?
Yes. Yep. So to use this, you gotta use the whole combo. You gotta use sand, you gotta use the white board limit, and you gotta use the hydrated lime. Hydrated lime brings it back to softness, it still gives some elasticity to it. It's just, this is modern, it's fine, that's where we're at in today's society, but like I said, since 30 BC. I'm convinced that this is a much better product to use. And it's because it's not fired at such a high temperature, but it still has like impurities and stuff of that nature. And lime was always kind of locally sourced. Like if you live close to a beach, you would just collect like oyster shells and seashells and crush those up and burn them. That would be your lime. You know, it's there. If you live in like most of the St. Esters comes from France. They have this huge rock quarry mountain that for like 165 years they've been specifically going after that one. So you'll find different lime sources just depending on the region. So yes.
Yeah, and just so that everyone knows too, if you're in a historic district here, there is a formula for the order that you're supposed to use.
Yes, and that's used in this here on the Portland side. However, my argument is old brick never had Portland in it. So I'm going to lean most of my customers more towards this. It's a little bit cheaper for this, so this is a much better product, you know, because it eliminates the Portland cement that was just not unique to this area 150, 160 years ago. Yes,
And
ma'am.
the stack mix, if you just have little repairs, would be okay? So you don't have a whole lot of little parts that have holes.
Yeah, clean them out. If it's just little holes, there, you can use different like pencil chisels of that nature, and hammer. Like I said, this is still one of my favorite tools here. 5-in-1. Clean it out. Use a tank sprayer. You know, wet all those spots up, and then go back and just start repointing. It's totally fine. Yeah, get more of a gray color with this. That's just the way they make it.
All right, I'm sure it's from Paul.
Yeah.
but it's great.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions? That's about it. But again, the Lithomax, it's cool because you can reshape it, and then Lithomax also is called Litho Step. That's more designed for tread, something that's going to be walked on quite a bit. This would be more for something that's not really at the type of edge. And it's just neat because you can actually sit there and reshape, kind of get that same surrounding surface, and it doesn't stand out so much like an obvious patch because they have certain colors. Yes.
Remember the inside wall and the interior wall is the same way to repair, because the plumbers control about place.
Very simple. Yep. The inside is interesting too, because that more is even softer because they knew right away the plastic team would be coming 3/4 or an inch of plaster on the front there. So it's even softer further you go into the house than the outside. Yes.
Yeah, my house is not great in siding where I have a 2 feet stone foundation exposed. I mean, in those regular stone, I have gap that I feel like honey.
That brings me back to like I would use a lime mortar like that and do it in blips. You know, don't pack all of that in at one time. Like pack in a little bit, like move to something else, give it 5-10 minutes or so, come back and pack it again, wait a few more minutes and then pack it. You just don't want to, when you're repointing stuff, fill it all in the shop because then it's all trying to dry and fire. the same time. But anytime you, going back to your question there, if you just have a few, make sure you use water. And that masonry needs that, it needs to be a damp surface with mortar being applied to that surface there. It's all about prep. And honestly, that's most things in life, whether it's painting or anything, you're doing a project, you need to prep it so the new material can adhere, prep it to that surface there. Yes,
I've got, two questions about chimney.
yes.
We've got an old home, none of the fireplaces are functioning. One of them is kind of like one of those visual, beautiful standout walls in the dining room, main part of the house. It's been bricked up poorly. So you can clearly tell where they're like collapsing and they're not providing support to the rest of the structure. Would you recommend patches for aesthetic? Because we're not gonna unbrick, like, we're not gonna use it again, but you can clearly tell where there's not adequate amount of mortar, it's stacked them properly. Would you remove that from this patch?
I would probably recommend to remove it because if you patch it, it might not have any integrity left in it, so it might just take a patch with it.
Okay,
There'd be nothing wrong with it, it's closed off, not being used, but I would probably just say start over.
okay.
But you could try the patch first, because you can always be like, if I didn't like the patch, then start from scratch and kind of go back. What was your second
My
question?
second question, our inspector said that the chimney was in good shape. It's been sealed off, this is a separate chimney. It was originally though, it was a gas fireplace. It's rather a small cavity.
Right.
It's got the metal trap door.
Yes,
I've never lived with a functioning fireplace, so excuse me. Okay, clueless. Over the years, black debris has started falling down, and it's like increased over the last like, month or so. Daily now, we're getting more and more black debris falling down. What's that indicate? Do we need to get brick repaired, chimney
the
repaired?
chimney probably needs repaired,
Okay.
because the internal exhaust system, and that's all the chimney is, it's an exhaust system. I don't think with your car and tailpipe, it's just exhausting all the gas that's from the combustion area, taking it out there. Most of the times, as it makes well at the top, that's the part that's being tapped by the weather, the rain and everything, so then it's only got one place to go, it has to come back down inside. And just being careful on chimneys too, because if you use too hard of a mortar, it will accelerate the damage. That's a big issue with, if something's already damaged, that's why you use the right materials is important.
And companies repair. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, any other last questions? About to wrap up here. Yes.
So on the inside of the house, if you're gonna expose the brick wall, is that plaster and kind of be structural? Is it okay? It's okay to do that?
I think it's all right to do that. I don't believe it was structurally. I often think those old guys would probably laugh at us, but I mean, that's a good question. I don't think so. John, you got any feedback on that one? No. He said no.
If you take it off, nothing you should put that on there, seal it or something.
And that kind of depends. Some walls will keep on powdering. You might brush past that wall, every week. You get a little more from this number would have the vacuum on. That's kind of the nature of the beast because that was never intended to be an exposed brick wall. Those old guys are probably crazy now. Guys would want exposed brick with hell, we would have done a better job on it. Inside. But if those guys all exposed it. That was, so when they laid a double brick wall, you would do the outside, because that's usually what's going to be seen, and you want to make sure that's plumb, but the inside was done overhang, and you just cut it and keep on laying. It didn't matter if the inside was crazy, because you knew the plaster was coming. For nowadays, it's like, wow, this is beautiful. And probably make them scratch their head back. I think that's beautiful. Is that over? No, I didn't anticipate it.
I don't know, we're gonna do the historic tax credits workshop, but that's one thing they will tell you, is those were not meant to be exposed. But just what you said, it's not as pretty as it should be, maybe, and it can be a problem.
It can be, it absolutely can be, because now you're introducing different breathabilities and different rooms, humidity and things like that. I'm more of a bigger fan of just maybe a section of it versus we expose the whole entire wall. I like maybe more of an accent style, just maybe just a little area. Something like that. Maybe when you see a whole bathroom, maybe just expose one side of the brick, because it will naturally just keep powder and drying. Anybody else? Correct. Yes.
So like you mentioned about you can see on the fireplace, the bulk my fireplace on the outside, 5 foot wide, the entire 2 stories of the house, all the mortars just pulled out on the outside. Some of the bricks small, some of them cracked. The bricks that like chipped on the outside, when I pull those bricks out, do I have to replace bricks or can I flip the brick around?
There's a good chance, that's a great question. We flip a lot of brick around. It is amazing how many times this brick is shot from the front. And you take the architect and cut the brick out and flip it over here. You know, and all it did works right back there. That's kind of another thing cool about a true clay brick. You can, I mean, unless it's completely pulverized and done for, but we probably 50% of the brick we extract out and just put them right back up.
My follow-up question is, if I see that some of the depths you're talking about, something you want to get like a 3/4 inch depth where you're retooling the face of the brick.
Yes.
If some spaces are more than that, do I have to pack it on in, or can I just do a straight 3/4 with pipe?
No, you definitely want to pack it in, because you want that old surface and the new surface to mate together. Okay. If there's any airspace between the two, that project's going down so fast. Water will sit back there, freeze thaw, I get this fluid. That's why it's important to make sure when you're repointing something, you touch back on that old material and build your way back out to. That's why I was saying doing it in several lifts, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 lifts like that. You want the old to meet properly with the new. That's why I'm saying just the spray bottle is so important. That way that old surface is damp enough to receive the new motor and actually bind and lock in.
Right, and if I was going up the 3-foot force to the head brick came through, as long as I know in between that section, I should be okay. Typically structure, you will use a small 3x3 or 2x2.
Yeah.
Where I can move it. Now, the mortar you're talking about with the same pasture, that sounds like it's probably the best bet for us to the 3-bag mix. We can add color to it. If I mix that up, and I'm doing lifts back in and working on the whole entire section for my scaffolding for our mat, how long will that stay malleable that I can still work?
Almost a day sometimes. I've mixed up, like in a wheelbarrow, we just did a basement down in Bellevue. We made a mix in a wheelbarrow, left it overnight. So by that point, it was like 4 o'clock. We came back the next day at 7:30 and just knocked it back up with the hoe. And I mean, with the shovel, it was, I mean, a touch of water and just a little bit of mix, and it was ready. So
This can be constituted.
what's that?
I can reconstitute.
Yes. So it also makes the stuff a lot more friendlier to use. Portland sucks at moisture.
Do you still recommend like a little hand tool with a nail as a measure to pull off or make it work?
Yeah, I just know.
That's a great question. How do we apply it? What's the right tool?
Good question. So I'll typically use a trowel, and I'm looking for this, the repointing mortar to almost be like a brown sugar consistency. So you have it on your, there's a couple different, you use so many different size pointing trowels. So once it's on there, you would put that right up against the surface and then start moving that back in there. And you want to make sure you feel that you're hitting the old surface. That's why I'm saying be careful on that air gap. You know, like if this is 1.5 inches, and this is 3/4 of an inch, whatever it is, to make sure you put that much amount.
Okay, and then follow up with her question and my question is that after we push that in, how long do we wait for it to kind of brush off and clean the line?
Thumbprint hard. So that depends. That's a
It
good
could be the
question.
next day.
It could be. It could very well be. But yeah, maybe one project outside on the sunny side in July, or you want an inside basement in December. So you're gonna have to wait for it to be about thumbprint hard. If you put your thumbprint on there and realize you're not really doing much, okay, that's a fine time. Most of the old school joints would have been with a churn brush. So you would, after you fill everything in, you would maybe cut the wall with one of your tools, and take a churn brush and smack it. And what that smacking does, almost like a whisk broom, like a corn broom, kind of like that. That actually pushes everything back, but it also allows channels for air and moisture to pass through. Most modern bricks nowadays, they're going to tell you to use like a sealed metal joint and seal that. You don't want a sealed joint. You want that breathability still there. Folks, that's about all. I went over a few minutes. Thank you all for coming.